Late-night television erupted into chaos as Hollywood A-lister Ben Affleck and host Jimmy Kimmel engaged in an unprecedented on-air clash that left viewers stunned. What began as a routine promotional appearance quickly descended into a heated exchange of accusations, revealing long simmering tensions and leaving the future of one of television's most recognizable personalities hanging in the balance. The tension was palpable from the moment Ben Affleck walked onto the stage of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience's enthusiastic applause quickly gave way to uncomfortable silence as viewers at home and in the studio sensed something was off. Affleck's smile seemed forced, his handshake with Kimmel noticeably brief. For those paying attention, the signs of an impending storm were already evident. "Welcome back to the show, Ben," Kimmel began with his characteristic smirk. "Always good to have you here, especially now that you're back in the director's chair with your new film." Affleck nodded politely, but his body language told a different story. He sat rigid in his chair, maintaining an unusual distance from Kimmel. "Yeah, thanks for having me," Affleck replied, his voice carrying a subtle edge that the more perceptive viewers caught immediately. "The film's been quite a journey." What should have been a straightforward conversation about Affleck's latest directorial project quickly veered off script when Kimmel decided to steer the interview in an unexpected direction. "So, before we get to the movie," Kimmel said, leaning forward with a gleam in his eye that veterans of his show recognized as trouble, "I've got to ask about something that's been making the rounds online." The camera caught Affleck's expression, hardening slightly. "Sure, what's up?" Kimmel pulled out his phone and displayed a tabloid headline suggesting trouble in Affleck's personal life. A topic that had been explicitly marked off limits by Affleck's publicist prior to the show. "Care to comment on this?" Kimmel asked, his tone deceptively casual yet loaded with implication. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the breach of protocol. Affleck's jaw tightened visibly. "Jimmy, I thought we had an agreement about the topics we'd cover tonight." "Oh, come on," Kimmel pressed, his voice taking on that distinctive tone he often used when going for a laugh at someone's expense. "The audience wants to know. Everyone's talking about it." "Everyone might be talking about it," Affleck responded, his voice dropping an octave. "But that doesn't mean it's appropriate for this interview. We agreed to discuss the film." The tension in the studio became almost tangible as Kimmel persisted, seemingly oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to his guest's growing discomfort. "It's just a simple question, Ben. Why so sensitive? I mean, it's not like you're a stranger to publicity." Something changed in Affleck's demeanor then. A switch flipped. Years of maintaining composure in the face of invasive questions and public scrutiny seemed to give way to a moment of raw authenticity. "You know what, Jimmy? This right here is exactly the problem with shows like yours." Affleck sat up straighter, no longer playing the game. "You bring people on under the pretense of promoting their work, but what you're really after is some sort of gotcha moment you can turn into a viral clip." The audience fell completely silent. This wasn't the playful banter they were accustomed to. This was real confrontation unfolding before their eyes. "Whoa, let's take it down a notch," Kimmel said, raising his hands in mock surrender, still attempting to maintain control of the situation through humor. "I'm just trying to have a conversation here." "No, you're not," Affleck countered, his voice steady but intense. "A conversation involves mutual respect. What you're doing is ambushing me with topics my team specifically asked you not to bring up." Kimmel's smile faltered slightly as he realized the situation was slipping out of his control. The producers off-stage began to panic, signaling for a commercial break, but both men ignored the cues. "Ben, you're being a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Kimmel attempted to pivot, looking to the audience for support. "It's just entertainment, after all." "That's where you're wrong," Affleck replied, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's. "There's a human being sitting across from you, not just content for your show, not just a headline. A person who came here in good faith." The confrontation was escalating, beyond anything the show's producers had anticipated. Behind the cameras, frantic discussions were taking place about how to regain control of the situation. "Look, if you can't handle a few tough questions," Kimmel began, his tone growing defensive. "Tough questions?" Affleck interrupted, incredulous. "There's a difference between tough questions and deliberately disrespectful ones. You know exactly what you're doing, Jimmy. You've built a career on it." The accusation hung in the air, heavy, with implications that extended beyond just this one interview. It touched on criticisms that had followed Kimmel throughout his career, allegations of mean-spirited humor, and punching down that had occasionally surfaced, but rarely in such a direct confrontation. "I've sat on this couch multiple times over the years," Affleck continued, warming to his subject now. "I've played along with your games, laughed at the jokes at my expense, because that's part of the deal. But there's a line, and you know you crossed it tonight." Kimmel's facade of casual amusement had completely fallen away now, replaced by a barely concealed anger. The power dynamic in the room was shifting palpably. For perhaps the first time in the show's history, the host was not in control. "The public has a right to know about the lives of public figures," Kimmel argued, abandoning humor entirely. "That's the price of fame, Ben. You know that better than anyone." "The public has a right to know about my work," Affleck corrected him. "They have a right to know about the projects I choose to be involved in. They don't have a right to every detail of my personal life. And they certainly don't have a right to speculation and rumors presented as fact on your show." The audience, initially uncomfortable with the confrontation, had begun to show signs of support for Affleck. Scattered applause followed his statements, which only seemed to fuel Kimmel's growing frustration. "You can't dictate the terms of every interview," Kimmel said, his voice rising slightly. "That's not how this works." "Actually, I can," Affleck replied calmly. "I can choose which shows to appear on. I can choose which topics I'm willing to discuss. And right now, I'm choosing to call out behavior that's not just disrespectful to me but harmful to the entire culture of how we treat each other in this industry." The commercial break signals had become increasingly urgent, but the confrontation had developed its own momentum now, beyond the control of network protocols or producer interventions. "You know what I think?" Kimmel said, leaning forward, all pretense of friendly banter long abandoned. "I think you're deflecting because you don't want to address the actual issue." "The issue isn't what you think it is, Jimmy," Affleck responded, a new note of sadness entering his voice. "The issue is that somewhere along the way, you forgot that your job isn't just to get ratings. It's to create a space where genuine conversations can happen." As the tension between the two men reached its apex, viewers at home could sense they were witnessing something rare in the heavily scripted world of late-night television. An authentic moment of conflict that revealed deeper truths about the entertainment industry itself. "You want to talk about authentic conversations?" Kimmel retorted, his voice carrying an edge now. "Let's have one. You've been in this business long enough to know how it works. The audience tunes in for the real stuff, not just to hear you plug your latest project." Affleck shook his head slowly, a look of disappointment crossing his face. "That's where you're wrong, Jimmy. People tune in because they want to be entertained, sure, but they also want to see real connections, not manufactured controversies." The studio audience had fallen into a stunned silence. The producers were frantically signaling from offstage, but both men remained locked in their confrontation, ignoring all attempts to rein them in. "You can't seriously believe that," Kimmel scoffed. "Every time we've had a moment go viral on this show, it's because we've pushed past the PR-approved talking points. That's what people remember. They remember it because it's sensationalized," Affleck countered. "Not because it's valuable. There's a difference between asking tough, meaningful questions and just trying to embarrass someone for ratings." The camera caught a close-up of Kimmel's face, revealing a flash of something that looked remarkably like guilt, before it was quickly masked by indignation. "So what exactly are you saying, Ben? That I'm some kind of villain because I ask the questions everyone wants answered. I'm saying there's a responsibility that comes with sitting in that chair, Affleck replied, gesturing to Kimmel's seat. You have a platform that reaches millions of people. How you use it matters. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience, catching Kimmel off guard. He glanced around, suddenly aware that the room's sympathies were shifting away from him. Let me ask you something, Affleck continued, his tone shifting from confrontational to genuinely curious. When did it become okay to ambush guests? When did it become acceptable to ignore the basic courtesy of respecting boundaries? Kimmel's expression hardened. When celebrities started using shows like mine just to sell their products without giving anything real in return. You want the platform without the scrutiny. That's not fair, and you know it, Affleck replied, his voice rising slightly. I've always been open about my work, my process, my passions. What I'm not willing to do is have my personal life dissected for entertainment value, especially when your team explicitly agreed those topics were off-limits. Off-limits, Kimmel repeated, making air quotes with his fingers. That's convenient, isn't it? You get to decide what's off-limits. What happened to journalistic integrity? At this, Affleck actually laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Journalistic integrity? Jimmy, you're a late-night talk show host, not Woodward and Bernstein. You're not exposing Watergate here. You're trying to get me to comment on tabloid headlines for a cheap laugh. The audience couldn't contain themselves any longer. Several people actually applauded, others letting out surprised oohs at the directness of Affleck's response. Kimmel's face flushed red. You know what your problem is, Ben? You can't handle criticism. You never could. Everyone still remembers how you reacted when your films got bad reviews. And there it is, Affleck interrupted, his voice eerily calm now. When the argument isn't going your way, you go for the personal attack. Classic deflection technique. It's not deflection. If it's true, Kimmel shot back, it's deflection when it has nothing to do with what we're discussing, Affleck countered. We're talking about your choice to violate an agreement about interview topics, and now suddenly you're bringing up how I handled film reviews years ago? Come on, Jimmy, you're better than this. Or at least, I thought you were. That last comment seemed to hit Kimmel particularly hard. For a moment his carefully constructed persona faltered, revealing a glimpse of genuine hurt. But it was quickly replaced by defensive anger. You don't get to come on my show and lecture me about integrity, Kimmel said, his voice low and intense. Not when you've used the media when it suited you. We all have, Affleck acknowledged, surprising Kimmel with his candor. The system's broken in a lot of ways, and we've all played our parts in it. But that doesn't mean we can't do better. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to change it. For a brief moment it seemed like the conversation might actually evolve into something productive. A real discussion about the symbiotic and sometimes toxic relationship between celebrities and media. But Kimmel, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the narrative, decided to double down instead. Let's be honest here, he said, leaning forward with renewed aggression. You're not mad because I asked about something personal. You're mad because you don't have a good answer. The studio grew so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Affleck stared at Kimmel for a long moment, visibly processing what had just been said. You know what, Jimmy? He finally said. I came here tonight out of respect for our history. All those times I've been on your show, all those stupid skits we've done together, I thought there was a mutual respect there. But clearly I was wrong. Affleck began to remove his microphone, a move that sent the show's producers into a panic. One brave production assistant hurried onto the stage, whispering urgently to Kimmel, who waved her away impatiently. So that's it? Kimmel challenged. One tough question and you're walking off? It's not about the question, Affleck replied, standing now. It's about the betrayal of trust. It's about the fact that you're so desperate for a viral moment that You're willing to ambush someone who thought they were coming onto a friendly show. The audience was completely riveted now, many of them recording the unfolding drama on their phones despite the studio's no-recording policy. They knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. "You know what's really sad here, Jimmy?" Affleck continued, now fully unclipped from his microphone. "You've built a career on being the everyman, the relatable guy who stands up to the powerful. But somewhere along the way, you became exactly what you used to mock." Kimmel stood as, "Well?" His face contorted with a mixture of anger and alarm. This was rapidly spiraling beyond damage control. "Ben, come on. You're overreacting. Sit down and let's—" "Let's what?" Affleck interrupted, now fully committed to the confrontation. "Let's pretend this didn't happen? Let's go back to the superficial banter so you can salvage your show? I'm done pretending, Jimmy." The stage manager was frantically signaling for a commercial break, but the red light on the cameras remained on. Whether by technical error or deliberate choice by someone in the control room, the entire exchange continued to broadcast live. "You want authenticity?" Affleck continued, his voice carrying across the stunned studio. "Here it is. For years, I've played this game. We all have. We come on shows like yours. We tell the funny anecdotes. We laugh at your jokes even when they cross the line. And you know why? Because that's the unspoken contract. We promote our work, you give us a platform, and everyone goes home happy." Kimmel's expression shifted from anger to something more calculated. He was trying to find an angle, a way to regain control of the situation. "That's a pretty cynical view of what we do here, Ben." "Is it cynical? Or is it honest? Because from where I'm standing, you just broke that contract. You agreed to certain parameters for this interview and then deliberately violated them the moment the cameras started rolling." The audience was completely silent now, collectively holding their breath as they witnessed this unprecedented public confrontation between two Hollywood heavyweights. "The parameters, as you call them, aren't set in stone," Kimmel argued, struggling to maintain his composure. "The conversation goes where it needs to go." "No." Affleck shook his head firmly. "The conversation goes where you steer it. That's your job as the host. And tonight, you deliberately steered it into territory you knew was off-limits." A member of Affleck's team had made her way to the edge of the stage, looking concerned. Affleck acknowledged her with a slight nod, but made no move to exit. "You know what I think?" Kimmel said, attempting to reassert himself. "I think this whole outraged act is just that, an act. You're using this moment to avoid answering a legitimate question." Affleck laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There it is again. When you're losing ground, you attack. Classic bully tactic." The word bully visibly struck Kimmel. For years he had cultivated an image as the underdog, the everyman who punched up at the powerful. Being labeled a bully on his own show, in front of millions of viewers, was clearly not something he had ever anticipated. "I am not a bully," Kimmel insisted, his voice rising. "I ask the questions people want answered." "No, Jimmy. A bully is someone who uses their position of power to make others uncomfortable for their own gain. Look around you." Affleck gestured to the stage, the cameras, the audience. "This is your house. You have all the power here. And you used it to try to embarrass me, knowing I came here in good faith." The stark assessment hung in the air. For perhaps the first time in the show's history, Kimmel appeared genuinely lost for words. "You want to know the saddest part?" Affleck continued, his tone softening slightly. "I used to respect you. I thought you were one of the good ones, someone who understood the human cost of what we do in this industry." Something in Kimmel's expression changed at these words. The defensive anger seemed to drain away, replaced by what looked remarkably like shame. "Ben, Kimmel began, but seemed unsure how to continue. "You don't have to say anything," Affleck said. "Just think about it. Think about whether this is really who you want to be. Because I guarantee you the audience sees it. They might laugh at the jokes, they might watch the clips online, But deep down, they know when someone's being treated unfairly. And eventually, they'll turn on you for it. As if to prove his point, a smattering of applause broke out in the audience, quickly growing into something more substantial. It was clear where their sympathies now lay. Kimmel looked out at his audience, visibly stunned by their reaction. This was his crowd, his home turf, and they were siding with his guest against him. It was a reality check he clearly hadn't seen coming. In that moment, something shifted in Kimmel's demeanor. His shoulders slumped slightly, the combative stance giving way to something more reflective. "You know what?" he said, his voice quieter now. "Maybe you have a point." A ripple of surprise went through the studio. This was not the comeback anyone had expected. "I do have a responsibility," Kimmel continued, seeming to work through his thoughts in real time. "Maybe somewhere along the way, in the race for ratings and viral moments, I lost sight of that." Affleck studied him carefully, trying to gauge the sincerity of this sudden shift. "It's not just about me, Jimmy. It's about everyone who sits in this chair. They're people first, celebrities second." "You're right," Kimmel admitted, and the simple acknowledgement seemed to cost him something. "I crossed a line tonight, and not for the first time." The audience was witnessing something almost unheard of in the carefully controlled world of network television, a moment of genuine accountability. "I'm not saying don't ask tough questions," Affleck clarified. "I'm saying there's a difference between tough questions and ambush journalism. There's a difference between a challenging interview and public humiliation." Kimmel nodded slowly. "I think I lost sight of that distinction a long time ago." For a moment, neither man spoke. The tension that had filled the studio began to transform into something else. Not quite resolution, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "So where do we go from here?" Kimmel finally asked, sounding more genuine than he had all evening. Affleck considered the question. "That's up to you. This is your show. But if you're asking me what I think you have an opportunity here. An opportunity to set a new standard." "For late-night television?" Kimmel asked. "For human decency and entertainment," Affleck corrected him. "For what it means to respect the people you interview, even when you're challenging them." Kimmel took a deep breath, looked directly into the nearest camera, and made a decision that would later be described as a pivotal moment in his career. "I owe you an apology, Ben," he said, his voice steady. "Not just for tonight, but for every time I've crossed the line for the sake of entertainment. And I owe the same apology to everyone who's ever sat in that chair and been treated as content first and a person second." The sincerity of his words seemed to catch even Affleck by surprise. He nodded in acknowledgement, the tension in his posture easing slightly. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "And to everyone watching," Kimmel continued, now addressing the audience both in the studio and at home, "I think we all just got a masterclass in integrity. Maybe it's time we rethink what we expect from our entertainment, and from each other." The audience erupted into applause, this time directed at both men. What had begun as a confrontation had evolved into something far more meaningful, a rare moment of authentic reckoning in an industry not known for its self-reflection. As the show finally cut to commercial, viewers at home were left with a lasting impression of two men who had moved beyond the script to engage with something real. In the days that followed, the exchange would be analyzed, debated, and shared millions of times across social media platforms, not for its controversy, but for its surprising resolution. For Ben Affleck, it marked a moment of standing his ground in an industry that often demanded compliance. For Jimmy Kimmel, it would prove to be the beginning of a significant shift in his approach to his role as a host, a humbling but ultimately redemptive chapter in his career. And for the entertainment industry as a whole, it served as a powerful reminder that behind every headline, every interview, and every viral moment, there were real people with real boundaries deserving of real respect.